I'm going to start trying to explain what's special about this course. It's a weird philosophy course. You don't need to care about that, but if you think that it's typical and go on expecting other courses like this, that will cause some trouble, which was probably not bad. But I've got to say, philosophy courses generally, the writer has some clear idea of what he's trying to say, or she, and then puts it out there and gives arguments to show that this is the right way to think about action or free will or the reality of physical objects or whatever the philosopher is thinking about. And that's fine, but these aren't philosophy books. There isn't a philosophy book in the course, even though it's called a philosophy course. I'm never clear whether my colleagues have noticed that and don't mind, or that nobody ever noticed. But in any case, what's the difference? Well, what these authors are all doing is describing a world, the Homeric Greek world, the Athenian Greek world in the Oresteia, and then I had the Roman world in there, but I've given up Virgil because I want room to overlap with Sean. But anyway, then the medieval world with Dante. These authors are trying to give you the experience of, so to speak, life at its best in each of these very totally different worlds. And they are trying to do it at such a deep level that they don't even know they're doing it. I can't explain more about that very well later, but you might already think, well, Homer certainly didn't know that that it was interesting to think that the warrior's hands went out to the food ready in front of them. He didn't even know that he was interested in a form of something like the middle voice. And all kinds of important things are going on. And these authors are writing down as best they can what it's like to, and now I use some jargon, what the understanding of being is in these various worlds. By the understanding of being, I mean, well, first, just what is it like to be a Greek warrior? What is it like to be a Christian saint? These come from different worlds. You couldn't be a saint in the Homeric world. You would just be a poor slob who let everybody walk all over you because you would turn the other face and be full of meekness and so forth. They don't value that. They don't even have a name for that, probably. And likewise with heroes, though. You can't be a hero in the medieval world. Odysseus is a sort of self-sufficient leader who is great in inspiring the men to do whatever he wants them to do, and they look up to him and trust him and so forth. That kind of independence to be, so Odysseus doesn't depend on anyone, and so least of all on God. And so he's a sinner. He's an example of a sin of pride, and guess what? Dante puts him way down in hell, 8th circle down out of 10. Everybody gets ranked. All sins get ranked, and all saintlinesses get ranked by Dante. That's already an interesting kind of world. Imagine a world in which everything, from insects to galaxies, is ranked in terms of how near to God it is. But anyway, so there are these two different worlds. And what these authors are doing is telling you something like what is it like to have the understanding of being. What that means, everything about being means, what is it like to have the understanding of what it is to be a man, to be a woman, to be a child, to be a warrior, to be a lover, and so forth. And there's the general notion, what is it to be? And you might think, well, that's just so general, there's no answer. But there is something to be said about it, all right? And the interesting thing is that these works of art say as clearly and eloquently as possible what that understanding of what it is to be is, and in Heidegger jargon, I'll write on the board who Heidegger is in a minute, that the works of art make it shine. That is, they show in this beautiful, clear way what it is to be a man or a woman. And that's now very different than trying to make sort of get right answers to deep problems like philosophers think they do and defend them. These people they don't have problems, and they don't have a sense that there's right answers. They're being called really by a world to express that world, to show that world, and make it shine. In a sense, you could say, as one of my TAs used to say, and I think you glamorize the world. You show the medieval world or the heroic world, let's say the heroes, at their shining best. Achilles is the perfect warrior, and Homer says when he's out there fighting, he shines. So now, where are we then? Now, a way to put this, which is probably not all that interesting to you all, but it means something, so I'll say it, is you could say, well, this isn't a philosophy course, this is a great books course. And that sounds right. We're reading a lot of great books. But great book courses all have a certain way of looking at these books. Namely, that the books are great insofar as they understand and express something which we already understand, which we finally, late in the story, have come to understand better. So they're kind of all patronizing. They're all kind of saying, well, given the kind of the innocence and primitiveness of those Homeric Greeks, for instance, you'd be surprised that the kind of nuances of human relationships they actually have experienced and so forth. And it's a great book because Homer's already got a glimmer of human social life at its best. But I haven't had time really to read very far in the introduction to this, and I'm certainly not recommending it yet. I haven't read far enough to know. But the guy who I've never heard of, and they don't tell us who he is, who writes this long introduction, see, he's immediately interested in the way that this is almost as good as Henry James's view of the subtlety of human relationships. And there's something so patronizing about that I fear the worst. We'll see. Keep your eyes open. A great books tradition is what you could call a humanist tradition. By humanist, I mean that there is some essence to what it is to be human. It's taken a long time for people to really figure out what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what an institution is, what a church is, what a constitution is, and so forth. But gradually, we've got it better and better grip on this business of what it is to be human. And a humanist is somebody who works at that, tries to understand and express clearly what these writers have somewhat understood, enough to make them somebody worth reading, even though we know better than they do. I don't know why they're worth reading, by the way. I haven't thought of this. Ask yourself, and if you're really a humanist reader, why would you bother to read these books at all? I mean, they are going to be something which you all already understand, because it's the right answer to what it is to be a human being insofar as we've gotten it so far. Let me write two names on the board just related to this. The person who thinks of history and is progressively getting it clearer and clearer about what it is to be everything, what it is to be a human being, what it is to be a star in the sky, what it is to be an animal, everything, is Hegel. And the person who really sort of calls him on that is my favorite guru, Heidegger. By the way, if I misspell things, just tell me. I'm dyslexic. I make all kinds of new spellings every time I write. So Heidegger has the view that there has been a whole series of worlds in our culture, and that seems right. Remember, I told you that's sort of in the language. There's the Homeric world, the Athenian world, the Roman world, the medieval world, and so forth. But Heidegger doesn't think that these worlds are getting it righter and righter about what it is to be a human being and what it is to be a world and so forth. Heidegger could think, well, they're each just doing a different thing. And he does think that. The Greeks, the Homeric Greeks and the medieval Christians are doing a totally different thing in in their understanding of being and what they get out of it. But it's stronger than that. Heidegger thinks that this is the big deal surprise for the day. According to the humanistic tradition, the great books tradition, things were getting better and better. We're getting a clearer and clearer account. Could anybody be so outrageous as to hold that things are getting worse? That Homer understood things better than we understand. And that it's very hard to see what Homer understands through all the taken for granted truths about human beings that we've accumulated. But Heidegger thinks, and I think, following him, and I'll try to show that's what we're going to be. We're going to be reading the Odyssey to understand a certain understanding of being and of the world, which has a richer, it's hard to find the right words, a richer, more meaningful, phenomenologically more appropriate or something. You've got to be careful, because if it isn't as if you want to say a right answer, but you're tempted to all the time. But there's some sense in which there's something Homer is sensitive to that we are not. Or, thank goodness, something Homer is sensitive to that we're still a little bit sensitive to. So it's very important that not only are they a series of understandings of being, but that they sort of leave behind when they go away, which they die when they die, the way the Homeric culture has died, and the medieval culture is perhaps dying. But anyway, when they go away, they still leave traces on the margins of this other understanding of human beings, which in some ways is richer and better than the one we're stuck in now. And it's very hard to talk about that. But insofar as I connect up with Sean Kelly, I have to talk about that. That is, he has the view that we're in very bad shape, which he calls nihilism, that our world is meaningless. We have to make choices, but there's no good reason for making one choice rather than another. So we're sort of paralyzed, and we're reflecting all the time, trying to figure out what to do, but there is nothing on which to base it. I mean, we'll get into that. There is, so Sean thinks that what's important is that the history of the West in philosophy and in these books, I better say something about that in a minute, but thinks that step by step these books have led us into nihilism, and that the wonderful world of Homer has been almost lost, but that it's retrievable. This is Melville's view. I mean, Melville is the hero of the course. Melville is the one who says in so many words, we have to go back to the Homeric Greeks and start over again and lure back those gods, the pantheon of Greek gods. And so we're going to have to talk about that. I'd be happy. Before Sean came on the scene, when I gave this course, life was a lot simpler. We had something like 8 great books, which had focused 8 worlds, 8 in the history of the West, and I just tried to explain what it was like to be in each of those worlds. It didn't occur to me to worry about whether they were better or richer, or however to describe it, more meaningful than others. And I didn't try to tell you all that you're really in a terrible nihilistic situation, and you're really miserable, and which is something, Sean is listening to this, no doubt, and which Sean certainly argues for very eloquently in the book. And it's fine to try to show that there's a sense in which we are unhappy, and a sense in which there is something what Nietzsche calls the happiness of Homer. And so we'll try to keep an eye on that, too. How many have read this is interesting. I think we'll see what happens. David Foster Wallace. Does that mean anything to anybody? You're a little. I think you're just a little bit too young to, and I'm much too old to read it. Sean is a David Foster Wallace fan, and Wallace, who's a writer, brilliant writer, who committed suicide about a year ago, and whose posthumous book sort of haunts our book because it's coming out. They keep postponing when they're going to publish the posthumous Wallace, and we keep postponing when we're going to publish the living us, and we seem to be on a collision, or hopefully reinforcing course. Anyway, Wallace has captured this special sadness of our age. But that's something I just wanted to mention. That's the way these two courses are going to somewhat diverge, and there will be times when I want to try to bring in Sean's. I mean, Sean thinks it's really ridiculous, and I think it's wonderful to think that to just teach 8 great books. I think that's, let me lay all this out right. I've never said it yet. So let me go back. So in the humanistic tradition, you've got these great books. But then I said, but that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for books that get it righter and righter and defend it as righter and righter of all the things about what it is to be. So what are we looking at? Well, I've never said this, so I'm going to plug it into the talking right now. That is, let's talk about great works. So if they're going to look at great books, we're going to look at works of art. Now that's just a name, but behind that name is something we can put into it. There's something that great works do that great books don't. Great books copy an age as best they can, describe it as best they can, and then judge it, so to speak, what it got right and what it got wrong. That's fine. That's the humanistic move. But the great works move is to say what's important about a great something or other, a great thing like this, is that it focuses a world, an understanding of being, which isn't right or wrong, but it is in some ways maybe better or worse, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that great works work, and when they work, they unify a culture. So that when that culture dies, the work of art dies too and stops working. It hasn't got any sort of universal truths in it that you can get out of it. So we're talking about, in this course, great works. In my version of this course, we just talked about 6 or 7 or 8, depending on the year, great works, how they worked, how they brought to focus a world and made it shine for the people in it, and that was it. And then on top of that course is now laying Sean's course, which says, and at the beginning Homer was shined more, and we lost it and lost it and lost it until we're in very bad shape now, and we have to get it back, and only Melville understands what we've lost and how to get it back, and that's why we're reading Moby Dick. That's beyond anything I ever imagined, though I'm happy to teach it and learn it, and we can all learn it together and read. It helps to read Sean's stuff, which I will be passing out presumably at various points. And I've been talking and talking, it occurs to me. Surely somebody must have thought some thought or want to say something. Okay.
The great books kind of lead us to a certain kind of thought. Now, I'm just trying to get an understanding of why you said that it's the books that lead us and not the books that kind of serve as like a marker that represents where.
Great. That's you use two crucial words. That's the right question. So we don't have a general word, so we have to talk about great books and great works. And great books represent, that's the word, mimesis is the fancy term, the current, whatever age they're talking about. And they don't lead us. And I may have said that, and I think you're right, take me to object. I mean, we just do it. We're willful, and you'll see later Kant says autonomous beings. We have free will. We give to ourselves whatever we think is meaningful, and so forth. And it's as if anything, we lead them, so to speak. And you're right. Great works do lead us. That is, Melville is being led to try to say something which he barely can understand, and I picture him sitting down every day and wondering what in the world he's going to write today. I mean, when you read Moby Dick, you think it's just amazing. So many things not necessarily compatible. He's got no unified idea that he's working out, and he's got no picture of the present age that he's representing, but he's drawn. That's true of all the great artists who deal with the great works. They are drawn to articulate the understanding of being. I say articulate, that's every one of these words needs explaining. I mean, one of them, you can represent it. That's what the humanist people do in their great books. You can create it. You can just write a book that creates a new imaginary world, say. So you can represent it, or you can create it. Those are the traditional. And then you can do a third thing. You can focus it. You can glamorize it. You can bring it out at its best. And that's what you can do if you let it lead you, and you respond to its drawing. And that's what the kind of artists that we're reading do. And I like your question a lot. Where does it come from? What are you?
It just struck me as I'd always thought of books like this and these sort of things as that they're kind of like markers along the way. To use Hegel's analogy, they're kind of signposts that say this is where the stream of history's at. And the way it sounded when you said it is that they're kind of something that's pulling us along rather than demarcating a point.
Okay, right. They're leading us to better and better representations or something, and we can try that. What they aren't doing is, because you can't do it sort of willfully, is what they're really doing, and I'm trying to say, if they're great, is that they're leading us, but they're not leading us by clear steps in a kind of progression, but they're drawing us to see things that we haven't seen before. And somebody like Melville is just the perfect un-Hegelian person. You cannot picture where he's at on the step-by-step progress of the human spirit. If anything, he's against it. He says specifically that he's against all completeness, which Hegel would be aiming at and just hoping to get. Okay, now, more good questions like that. We need them. Yeah. I didn't really hear your question except for the word beautiful was in there. Right? Say it again, loud and slow. I see. Okay. That's the same point again, but it's important to say it over and over. It depends on. If you're in the great books business, then you're supposed to compare them, and you're supposed to see how in each stage they got better and better at understanding what we are and what we're up to, and you're patronizing them by telling them when they got it what we now see as right and so forth. But that's not what happens with the great books. Then you just have which are the great books isn't something that you figure out. It's a kind of contest in what I'm going to say every once in a while, the background practices. I got to explain that. That's just the way people act, the way men relate to women, and the way they stand, and what counts as dignity, and what counts as humility, and what counts as so forth and so forth. All kinds of stuff that goes into making the particular worlds and there you can't simply compare, because they're incompatible. They're incommensurate, to use this fancy word. They aren't. There's no measure on which you can judge one is better than the other. They are just each one doing its thing. You can have this higher order measure in which you can say that they are losing something. We'll have to talk about that. But for the time being, it's better to just think that each of these worlds is self-contained, and you can't say about it that it's better or worse. How can you compare the Homeric Greeks with their heroes and bad guys with the medieval Christians, which they're saints and sinners? There's no place to compare them. They're just utterly in a different business. When you get to the point where the hero Odysseus, which was the superstar of the Odyssey, is 8 places down in hell in Dante, you can see that must be talking about some very, very different worlds. Okay, is that any help? I mean, so if you're in the great books business, at first round, which is where I was until Sean Kelly came along, you just treat each world individually, see what it's up to. Don't ask about, and there's no question about how it could be better or worse than any other world. That's the great works. Now maybe there's a higher level at which you can still say, yes, but some of these great works cover up important aspects of what's going on, and others don't, or something. I think it's true, but I hadn't gotten that far. But our book has to take on that, but it isn't as if you compared them on their own terms. They haven't got any own terms to compare them on. That's the sense in which they are incommensurate. You can't measure them against each other. But you can have some higher order thing that isn't in either of their terms, which is something like how much they cover up and how much they reveal about human experience. But then you've got to be careful you're not in the Hegel business and saying, the ones who reveal it are the right ones and the one who cover it up are the wrong ones. It's tricky. I mean, I don't think that I'm saying something at this point which is clear and that you haven't got it. I haven't got it. I mean, so I'm just trying to grope for it. Go ahead. What? That makes us seem to be so nihilistic and unhappy. It's not my specialty. I don't feel nihilistic and unhappy. But and I don't read David Foster Wallace, for better or for worse. Anyway, I read Pynchon and Nabokov and people who invent worlds that are more fun. But let me think about it. So ask your question again. Okay, yeah, I see. Yeah, I will, as soon as Sean lets me. Sean is out of touch right now he's retreated into the White Mountains and has no phone and no email, but he's coming back Saturday. As soon as I can, I'll ask him if it's okay to distribute or put on the web, I guess we could do it, put on the web his opening chapter in which he argues that we all are in a very bad state and need help. And you can then read it and see. I'll be very interested to know. Well, Sean and I argue. I say, but these students aren't upset like that, and they don't feel in bad shape and needing help and deeply sad and so forth. And then he says, oh yes, they do. And I don't know. So you're the students. You must know. We'll find out. Yeah.
Trying out philosophy.
So I missed that. Say that again.
The same ways as Heidegger does, that everything's in its own unique context. That might not be your personal philosophy either, but you can go into.
Well, no, if I said that, I probably did, and I was just being confusing. I mean, Heidegger has these worlds, and he thinks that they are incommensurate. They have a different understanding of being in each one, and he has a word for that, and he can find that word in that culture and show how it works. And then Heidegger also thinks that it's been downhill all the way in the West since Plato, at least, and that's a separate thing. And I don't know whether I buy the second one, but I certainly think that he's got a great story to tell about each of these worlds and each of these understandings of being and how they are incommensurate with each other. And it's going to be up to you after you've read these 5 or whatever it is books to see whether you think that the worlds that they show are somehow, in some way you'd have to explain, less livable than they get less and less livable as we go on. Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, are you giving equal credence to both philosophers for both ways of thinking?
Well, no, but I see why you're asking that. I mean, Hegel is too much in on the ground floor and therefore wrong, according to what I'm saying. He's a philosopher. He really thinks that he's getting the right answer to what it is to be a human being, an institution, and an object in the world, in the universe and everything. And he's arguing for it and so forth. That's not the level. What you need, and he thinks that things are getting clearer and clearer and more and more meaningful and more fulfilling and so forth. That's not going to work. I mean, I don't want to hold that. If you do hold that, you will have to have some kind of humanist view about what the essence of human beings is and how we're getting it better and better. How their relations, men and women's relations should be, and how the individual and the state should be, and how babies should be, and how children should be, and how all the various cultures in the world have lined up as steps toward an answer. If you think that's what you get if you're Hegelian, and that's not what I'm saying. But it's true that whereas Hegel thinks at the ground floor level, we're getting more and more clear about just what it is we are and what we're up to, then there's this other thing which is neither Hegel nor what sometimes people call Dreidegger view. In my view, is that that there are these different incommensurable worlds. Then there is what you're saying. There is, and you're asking me whether there is, a way in which Heidegger has a view about, and now comes the tricky part, sort of progress like Hegel. And the answer's got to be very funny. He doesn't have a view about progress at all like Hegel. He thinks we're doing a kind of regress. Things are getting worse and worse. But he maybe shouldn't even think things are getting worse and worse, because he has to have, then, some standards. And where's he going to get those standards? They ought to be inside these various worlds that are incommensurable. So it's a tricky job to describe how things are getting worse and worse. But Heidegger does think so. But he wants to do it at a level beyond the ground floor level about getting it right and wrong about all the things that human beings have to get it right and wrong about. If you have to say anything, at least it would be about what reveals more and more what an understanding of being is, and what it is to have an understanding of being. Something, so shifting it up one meta level. That's what Heidegger's got. But I think, I'm trying to think, I don't think we're going to be talking about that in this course. No, if you got interested in that, then you would come and take the late Heidegger course. Heidegger didn't think about that either at first. But later, he thinks more and more about how to describe the way things are going wrong in our culture and what you have to do to fix it. And I'll tell you something that's just, it won't mean much to you yet, but just so not to be so mysterious. These are all a series of things, of monotheisms of various sorts, whether it's maybe not in Homer, that's what's so interesting about Homer, but by the time you get to Aeschylus and Dante, and that's all, as Nietzsche would say, monotonotheism. That is, that there's one truth and one God. And Heidegger thinks more and more that that's the problem, the mono. And the Homer, because he was a polytheist, was okay. And Melville, who says he's a polytheist, is okay. And you have to trace the way this mono thing came into the culture and took it over more and more, and finally died. I mean, Heidegger believes Nietzsche's view that God is dead, so now the mono is over, and we will be better off. Somehow, I'm saying weird things now that you won't really see until much later. But it's as if the belief in the mono, the one God-like something, which explains everything, is part of the problem and covers up the sacred. And only when the mono God is dead will we get back in the right relation to the sacred. That's what Heidegger thinks. That's what Melville thinks. But that's beyond this course. I mean, but it's good to know where it came out. Anything else? Yeah.
How the world is today. I found the absence of James Joyce's Ulysses notable, just because many people accredit it with the that after that book came out, that is when the postmodernist era started. That's when people began to turn more towards nihilism. And I was just wondering.
I would hate to go out on a limb on podcasting to the whole world on views on things I don't know enough about. But you're talking about Joyce's Ulysses, is that right? Okay, here's a book that is sort of, when I read it, I had this feeling that everything was up for grabs and everything was possible, and there were all kinds of ways you could look at things and make jokes about things, and there was no mono thing. And that's what you're seeing too in making it, calling it postmodern. Postmodern is definitely one reaction to the unity of the truth about everything. So why don't we have Ulysses in the course? Because there's a better example of postmodern, way better, because he's got it more directly related to the philosophy concerns, and that's Nietzsche. Nietzsche is the one that takes apart Hegel. I put Nietzsche over here. And is that right? Nietzsche. I need an E on the end or something. Yeah, okay. But let's not get into this. If you want to, Hans Sluga is giving a Nietzsche course this semester. Nietzsche is very interesting and very important. And if you have had some philosophy already, you should definitely take it. Yeah.
Somewhat related to Heidegger, I was wondering if Heidegger thinks that the world is getting worse because they're...
No, that's not it. I'll try once more, but just not what I should be telling you or thinking about right now. How to sum up Heidegger's view of what's going wrong. We're covering up the importance of mystery, of wonder, of receptivity and openness, which were once important parts of our culture in Homer, and gratitude on all these things that Homer has so much of, and what helps make his world so exciting and so meaningful and so rich. We're gradually losing touch with that. That's what Heidegger wants to worry about at the end. And at the very end, he's saying it all starts when you try to find one single truth that's going to explain everything. And period. But I don't, come to office hours, but don't ask me to do this now. I can't say it any better. But by the way, in office hours, I should say something. You're welcome. In fact, I invite you to come to office hours, Wednesday 2 to 4. And the way it happens, and again, I was sort of drawn into this. It wasn't my idea. That I discovered when I had office hours that there was always me talking to 1 or 2 people and about 6 or 8 people hanging around outside my door trying to hear what I was saying to them and what they were saying to me. So I invited them in. So now my office hours usually has about 10 people in it, and it's a kind of super discussion section in which the hard problems that have come out get discussed. And if you want to talk to me about something, personal related to your academic problems, or even just what you want to say but you don't want to say it in front of everybody about Heidegger or meaning or whatever, you can always send me an email and I'll make an appointment. But it just has turned out to work very well to let the office hours be like a discussion section. And that's when you bring that up, come to office hours and we can talk more. Now, should I go back to this? I have this feeling that, I haven't read It's a little late in the story at this point, but it's so good that I can't resist it. Here is the perfect example of the kind of smugness that knows that we're getting things righter and righter, and that there is some right answer to all these philosophical questions, and that we can judge each philosopher on how well they're doing. So here is a guy named Kivy. I don't know who he is. I think he's at Princeton maybe. But anyway, he says the following: the most persuasive and influential defense of art, which he means literature particularly, in a humanistic education. See, he's my humanist. In a humanistic education centers around the belief that works of art, and he means great books, of course, are sources of knowledge. That's suspicious. That artists, like physicists, biologists, or economists, are discoverers and teachers of truths. And there he means cross-cultural, universal truths about human beings, just like physics tells us about truths about nature. Now, back to this. What defenders of the knowledge claim of the fine arts tells us is that we can find in the fine arts something that we can't find in the natural sciences, something called humanistic knowledge, or better, knowledge about ourselves as human beings. There we have it. I mean, that's pretty clear. So there is a right answer to what we are as human beings, and the humanities know it, or are gradually finding out, just like the physicists know a lot about the physical world and are gradually finding out more. Someday they may find out everything that there is to know. That's, you can hear it, that's just the opposite of this view that there are these various worlds and that things are not obviously getting it righter and righter. They may just be, I'm just repeating this clearly, I hope, they could be just incommensurate worlds, each one of them just different. Kivy has no way of thinking about that. Or it could be that it's worse than that we're losing an understanding of the most important things about human beings. And let me say one more thing before I say you. I want to say also too that I teach courses in existentialism, that is in Heidegger and Kierkegaard and Pascal and so forth. And what I'm really doing is giving you, and Heidegger and Nietzsche and Sartre too, you'll recognize more. And all these existentialists have the view that there is no human nature to get it right about. That's just another way of putting the same thing. There are just these incommensurate worlds, and I want to just add another important person here, Pascal, who in about 1650, is it? I don't have time to go back and look at what I said in here about the date, and I'm very bad about dates. Sometime in the late 1600s. Anyway, Pascal says custom is our nature. That means that there is no human nature, but that whatever culture you're in gives you a whole understanding of what it is, again, let's say this time, to be masculine and feminine, and just to take an example. And that each culture gives you a different one, and you don't know you've got it, and the culture doesn't know you've got it. It's in your body. It's in everything how you see things and how you do things and how you say things and so forth. And the existentialists are the main sort of opponents. And I just want to read you something about that will prepare you for something fascinating in Melville. Only there's so many different pieces of paper I now have that I don't know whether I'm going to find it. That's because it's over here. It's in a book. Okay, in a book called Outline of a Theory of Practice by Pierre Bourdieu. You won't probably be coming across him again, which is too bad because he's really very interesting. He's a sociologist, an anthropologist, and I'm just going to read you one thing because he's got such a good feeling for this mysterious something, which is what's there in the background of each of these cultures and how it is, and this is the new thing I want to talk about, how it's embodied in the people who live in the culture in a way which makes it transparent to them. They don't see it. And the work of artists are sensitive to it and called by it. But here's Bourdieu's description of it. the principles embodied in this way of being cultured, in what look like insignificant details of dress and bearing and manners and so forth, the principles embodied in this way are placed beyond the grasp of consciousness. See, consciousness is such a big deal in philosophy, has been a big deal in philosophy at least since Descartes. But I think wrongly, and this is Bourdieu saying why wrongly. The principles embodied are placed beyond the grasp of consciousness and hence can't be touched by voluntary, deliberate transformation, cannot even be made explicit. Nothing seems more ineffable, more incommunicable, more inimitable, and therefore more precious than the values given body, made body, by the transubstantiation achieved by a hidden persuasion of an implicit pedagogy. I mean, Bourdieu is a mouthful, but can you follow this? I don't know about. Let me start. So there are these values made body. That is, they become part of your body. You're just trained up in them as a baby from the moment you're born, and that's what he calls this implicit pedagogy, capable of instilling a whole cosmology, an ethics, a metaphysics, a political philosophy, that is, a whole understanding of being, as I've talked about it, through injunctions as insignificant as stand up straight or don't hold your knife in your left hand. I mean, that's this amazing view that there are all these little things that fit together in any particular culture that you get acculturated into, that give you an understanding of being. And now he's saying, and you aren't conscious of them. It becomes almost impossible to become conscious of them. And that's behind what these people, the artists who are doing the works of art, are being called to articulate. Remember, articulate, I don't know if I made it clear enough, is this third thing. The artists don't create these values, and they don't just represent the values as if they were sitting there and they were copying them down. They focus and articulate and bring out as much as they can, more by showing and shining of it than saying things about it. What's the most important ideas in the culture. And now I wanted to read the other thing. Okay, and here, just skipping crazily because it's so wonderful, from Bourdieu trying to say what it is that these artists who make works of art are doing, and how everybody's got an understanding of being in them. Here's Melville on the same subject. How many have read Moby Dick already? Oh, so you don't know how marvelous it is. But here's a typical marvelous example. There is Queequeg, who is Melville calls a savage. He's a black guy from some strange culture in the South Pacific, which are cannibals, and the main hero of Moby Dick, Ishmael, gets to like him more and more as the book goes on. Many spare hours Queequeg spent carving the lid of his coffin with all manner of grotesque figures and drawings, and it seemed that thereby he was striving in his rude way to copy the parts of the twisted tattooing on his body. And this tattooing had been the work of a departed prophet and seer of his island, who by those hieroglyphic marks had written out on his body a complete theory of the heavens and the earth and a mystical treatise on the art of attaining truth. So that Queequeg, and now comes this amazing thing, in his own proper person was a riddle to unfold, a wondrous work in one volume, but whose mysteries not even he himself could read. That's just a beautiful way of saying what Bourdieu says in this mouthful way. And so I'll just say one more word and then we stop. This understanding of being, which we've all got written into our bodies, and which gives us a meaningful world, gives us whatever matters in the world for the people who share that world. It's at least there are three ways that it's not easily accessible. This is the first one, that it's in your body, not in your mind, and therefore going to be hard to get at. It's what women's consciousness raising groups used to try to get at, what it is to be feminine and masculine in our culture. But then it's also hard to get at because it's so pervasive, like the water to a fish if everything is colored by this particular way of seeing things, then you're going to have a terrible time seeing it, because it just seems to disappear because it's everywhere. So it's so pervasive, and it's, now I forgot my third thing. What is it? Oh yeah, that it has to withdraw, that's Heidegger jargon, to do its work. That is, whatever this background, taken for granted understanding of being is, it's to talk, like one of my other favorites, Merleau-Ponty, we don't need to talk about it, but he says, it's like the illumination in the room. You can't see this illumination in the room. If you could, you couldn't see the people in the room. It's got to be invisible, this understanding of what it is to be, so that you can relate to all the particular things that are. And so that's what the artists are trying to talk about. And you can't represent it, and you don't create it, but you can make beautiful things that articulate it so that you can glamorize it and see it shining. And that's what these works of art are, and that's what we're going to try to see. And it goes against everything else that you will try to see in the university, I think, but it's worth seeing. I think that's enough for the day. Oh, wait, don't go away. We've got to get these cards in some systematic way. Yeah, pass them toward the center, and the PAs will pick them up. Don't go away. Another very important thing I forgot to say, which maybe you already understood it. Read the first 4 books of the Odyssey for next Tuesday. I can't lecture if you have, and you won't, it's not worth your coming if you haven't read them. And it's fun, and it's so do it. That's the assignment.